At 15 years old, the girl sat in the courtroom with a smile that sent chills down everyone's spine. While other girls her age were busy choosing dresses for prom or chatting about teenage crushes, this girl lived in cold, twisted thoughts that had baffled investigators for months. She genuinely believed she was too young to be held accountable for her actions, that her youth would be a shield protecting her from any consequences. What she didn't know was that simple text messages and blood-stained fingerprints on a phone had already sealed her fate. Those small pieces of evidence were enough to convince the judge that some monsters don't need to grow up to be dangerous, and this monster had to be locked away before it could harm anyone else. How could a child plan to kill her own father? And how could that monster hide behind the innocent face of a high school girl? These were the questions that haunted Knoxville for years. They stemmed from a crime so cold it defied all human logic and morality. This wasn't an impulsive act or a youthful mistake. It was a calculated, controlled, and executed crime by a girl who believed she was above the law. The victim, a devoted and gentle father, was killed not out of hatred or violence, but simply because he dared to restrict the freedom of a daughter who thought she was untouchable. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On the night of October 2nd, 2008, darkness fell over the quiet suburban streets of Knoxville, Tennessee, carrying the crisp chill of early southern autumn. Dry leaves rustled across neatly trimmed lawns under the pale yellow glow of streetlights. Each house in the small residential area on the edge of the city was like a private fortress of warmth and routine, where people believed locked doors and wooden fences were enough to keep out the evils of the world. In the modest two-story home on Cedar Ridge Court, Stephen Mercer, 42, was settling in for a peaceful evening. The smell of dinner lingered in the air, and the steady hum of the dishwasher filled the kitchen. An electrical engineer and single father of 3 daughters, Stephen was accustomed to the quiet of the house after the kids had gone to bed. He turned on the TV, flipped through a few pages of the newspaper, then leaned back on the living room sofa, his tired eyes closing as a late-night show played on. That tranquility was merely an illusion, a fragile veneer over a house that had known calm, predictable days for years. Stephen Mercer was well-liked by neighbors, always ready to lend a hand, tending to his garden with the care of a man who valued order. He had no enemies, no ties to trouble. That night, there was only the sound of the wind weaving through the trees and the distant hum of traffic, a serene soundtrack that gave no hint of what was to come. The attack wasn't about money or a spur-of-the-moment conflict. It was an intrusion of pure motiveless malice, devoid of emotion, a series of actions so cold they left investigators searching for an explanation that didn't exist. The first record of the tragedy came at 6:14 a.m. A brief 911 call, the panicked voice of a female neighbor reporting screams and blood in the Mercer house. The operator caught only a few fragmented words before the line went dead. A heavy silence fell over the neighborhood, then the wail of police sirens tore through Knoxville's thin morning fog, signaling the end of a seemingly peaceful night and the beginning of one of the most chilling cases the city had ever seen. When the first 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of the house on Cedar Ridge Court, the early morning light was just spilling over the rooftops. Fog still clung to the grass, and the autumn breeze carried a chill into the air. Officer Mark Doyle, the first to enter, noticed the front door slightly ajar, with no signs of forced entry. He pushed it open, and the metallic smell of blood hit him, mixed with the stale scent of old coffee and damp wood. In the living room, the sofa was tipped over. A shattered coffee mug lay on the floor, and the TV was still on, casting a dim glow over bloodstains splattered across the room. A trail of red stretched from the living room carpet to the back door, then disappeared into the yard. A baseball bat, stained with blood and strands of hair, lay at the foot of the table. Doyle signaled his team to secure the area, set up caution tape, and photograph the scene. Every detail was documented: the small footprint in a pool of blood, faint tire marks by the back path, an untouched leather wallet full of cash on the table. No signs of theft or a struggle, no broken windows. Everything suggested the attacker had entered without forcing the door, someone familiar with the house. Doyle carefully opened the back door. In the early morning light, drag marks on the ground led toward a narrow road connected to the main avenue. He noted in his book, "Body likely removed by private vehicle." The garage was empty. Stephen Mercer's silver Ford was gone. Across the street at a neighbor's house, Stephen's two younger daughters were found in a state of panic, wrapped in blankets, eyes swollen from crying. When questioned, the older girl only repeated, "Dad was sleeping downstairs." Then he was gone. Both were taken to the station for care and statements, while the forensic team continued their work. By 8 a.m., news had spread through the neighborhood. Residents gathered behind the barriers, staring at the cordoned-off house. An elderly man said he heard a faint noise around 3 a.m., but thought it was the wind. Another woman claimed she saw car headlights flash down the road toward the highway. By mid-morning, the forensic team had collected blood samples, hair, and fingerprints from the scene. All pointed to the same conclusion: a deliberate attack, not impulsive, with no material motive. At a brief press conference at the Knoxville Police Department, Lieutenant Doyle confirmed, "No signs of forced entry. This was a calculated act." The statement was immediately broadcast on local news channels at noon, alongside images of the house wrapped in yellow caution tape, sparking a wave of unease in the community. Students at the elementary school where Stephen's daughters attended were sent home early. The nearby church opened its doors for residents to pray. Many said they had never felt such palpable fear in this once peaceful neighborhood. Meanwhile, the investigation team continued combing the area around the Mercer house. In the backyard, they found more small shoe prints, not matching the victim's size, near tire marks. Doyle marked them, looked down silently, then added to his notes, "Possibly more than one person involved." As dusk fell, the red and blue flashing lights of police cars still reflected off the windows of nearby homes. Cedar Ridge residents locked their doors earlier than usual, quietly peering through curtains. The evening news on WBIR opened with images of the Mercer house, captioned, "Police investigate mysterious disappearance, suspected criminal element." The reporter ended the broadcast with a chilling line. According to an inside source, police are not ruling out the possibility that the perpetrator was close to the victim. In Knoxville that night, for the first time in years, people double-checked their locks and began to wonder what could drive someone within a family to act so ruthlessly. On the morning of October 3, 2008, just hours after the scene was secured, the investigation officially expanded. Lieutenant Mark Doyle and the Knoxville Police Department's Criminal Task Force began canvassing the area around Cedar Ridge Court. Traffic and residential surveillance cameras within a 10-mile radius were requested to pull footage from the night of October 1 to the morning of October 2. By mid-morning, a technician analyzing the footage reported a key detail around 4:17 a.m. A silver Ford, matching the vehicle registered to Stephen Mercer, was spotted on a road heading north toward I-75, about 12 miles from the victim's home. The image was blurry, but the license plate was clear enough. SJM 9824. Two figures were in the front seats, unidentifiable, with a third in the back. No signals indicated the car returned to the city afterward. Based on the movement data, police launched a search along I-75, extending to the Norris Lake area. By late afternoon, a hiker reported seeing a car parked abandoned on a lakeside road, about 40 miles north of Knoxville. When police arrived, the Ford was confirmed as Stephen Mercer's. The doors were locked, the driver's side window cracked, and dark brown stains, likely blood, streaked the exterior. The forensic team was dispatched. When they opened the trunk, the scene inside silenced the team for a moment. Stephen Mercer's body was found, tightly wrapped in a gray blanket, his head severely deformed with deep open wounds on his forehead and temples. Beneath the blanket was a blood-soaked pillow, and some old newspapers, seemingly used to absorb or conceal the blood. Doyle stood silently, jotting briefly. Body moved shortly after death. Suspected weapon baseball bat from scene. Forensic results later confirmed Stephen Mercer died from multiple head injuries, with at least 6 severe blows from a blunt object. Estimated time of death was around 3 a.m. on October 2nd. No signs of resistance. No alcohol or drugs in his system. Police ruled out self-inflicted injury or robbery. Doyle shifted the investigation to the victim's personal relationships. Stephen's phone was found in the car, battery low but data recoverable. The last message sent was at 10:12 p.m. on October 1st to his eldest daughter. "Don't stay up too late. Dad's home early tomorrow." After that, the phone was inactive. What caught Doyle's attention wasn't the message, but the prior call history, multiple missed calls from an unknown number repeated over the past week. When traced, the number belonged to Tyler Reed, 19, living in a small rental complex in South Knoxville. Tyler had prior warnings for truancy and disorderly conduct, but no criminal record. When checking Madison Mercer's phone, the victim's 15-year-old daughter, police found a deleted text thread. The digital forensics team recovered it. Conversations between Madison and Tyler, revealing a hidden romantic relationship kept from the family. The final messages between them stunned the team. At 2:58 a.m., Madison sent, "He's asleep now." Tyler replied, "Make it quiet." After that, Madison's phone went offline. Doyle stared at the screen, said nothing, and wrote, "Confirmed, direct contact with perpetrator." Expanding GPS data analysis, the tech team found that between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. on October 2nd, 3 mobile devices belonging to Madison Mercer, Tyler Reed, and a third, Marcus Hale, 22, were detected near Norris Lake, less than a mile from where Stephen's car was found. Movement data showed they left Knoxville around the time the Ford was caught on camera. Marcus Hale, the third person, was identified as Tyler's friend, living on disability benefits, with a history of bipolar disorder and self-proclaimed protector of runaway teens. Doyle concluded all 3 had planned and executed the murder together. That evening, Knoxville Police Headquarters held an urgent meeting. Arrest warrants were issued for 3 suspects, Madison Mercer, 15, Tyler Reed, 19, and Marcus Hale, 22. Regional stations were alerted, and photos of Tyler and Marcus were sent to stores, gas stations, and neighborhoods around Norris Lake. As the search team deployed, an unexpected lead came from South Knoxville. A Walmart employee on Clinton Highway reported seeing 3 youths walking nearby early on October 3rd. Per the description, a blonde girl in a gray jacket was with 2 young men, one carrying a backpack, the other holding a large plastic bag with fast food and hair dye. Police responded immediately. At around 9:45 a.m., they spotted 3 individuals matching the description walking along the roadside, half a mile from the store. When the patrol car stopped, none of the 3 fled. Madison looked down, hands in her pockets, staring at the ground. Tyler stayed silent, only raising his head when asked to put his hands up. Marcus smiled, saying something unclear. Police confiscated the plastic bag, containing snacks, soda, black hair dye, and $47 in loose cash. Doyle received a call, 3 suspects detained, no resistance. Miranda rights were read on the spot. The 3 were taken to headquarters for separate interrogations. In the command office, Doyle looked at a photo of the 3 faces on the screen. A teenage girl with a blank stare, a lanky young man with a cold gaze, and a young man who seemed oblivious. He wrote the final line in that day's report, "Mercer case, suspects identified." This crime isn't just murder, it's a plan. In Knoxville that night, as local news aired footage of the Ford being towed from Norris Lake, residents realized their fears were real. The Mercer home hadn't just lost a father, it was torn apart by the very hands of the daughter he trusted most. At Knoxville Police Department headquarters, interrogations began that afternoon on October 3rd, 2008. The 3 suspects, Madison Mercer, 15, Tyler Reed, 19, and Marcus Hale, 22, were separated and placed in individual interrogation rooms. All were read their Miranda rights, and the sessions were fully recorded per protocol. Lieutenant Mark Doyle and 2 other investigators handled each case. None of the 3 immediately requested a lawyer. Madison was brought into the first room. She wore a gray jacket, her hair disheveled, face streaked with road dust, but her eyes remained eerily calm when Doyle asked if she knew why she was there. She shrugged, "Because my dad's missing." For the first 30 minutes, she denied any involvement, claiming she'd been at a friend's house all night and only heard about her dad's disappearance the next morning. When asked for the friend's name, she gave vague answers, unable to provide an exact address. Doyle observed her, noting no signs of panic or fear, instead, a rigid restraint, her eyes occasionally locking onto the camera as if aware she was being recorded. She denied knowing Tyler Reed's whereabouts that night and claimed they had broken up. About an hour later, when investigators presented the recovered text messages, the conversation between her and Tyler, saying he's asleep now and make it quiet. Madison stared at the screen for a few seconds, then said flatly, "That's not me." When Doyle pointed out the messages were sent from her number at 2:58 a.m., she went silent, looked down at the table, and said, "Someone could have used my phone." Her response prompted Doyle to note, "Active denial, no emotional defense." Meanwhile, in the next room, Tyler Reed sat motionless before two investigators. Initially, he stayed silent, asking only for water and a cigarette. When pressed about the texts, he furrowed his brow but didn't respond. After 2 hours, investigators showed him images of the silver Ford abandoned at Norris Lake, along with GPS data matching his phone. Tyler looked at the photo, sighed, and asked, "Did she say anything?" When asked who she was, he replied, "Madison." Then he started talking. Tyler's statement began with confusion. He said Madison had constantly complained about her father's control, how he wouldn't let her see her boyfriend, and had threatened to call the police over their relationship. Tyler said she couldn't take it anymore, and said if her dad disappeared, things would be easier. At first, Tyler thought she was just venting, but in the weeks that followed, she sent specific texts asking about ways to make him sleep longer and how to stop being scared. When asked about the night of October 2nd, Tyler lowered his head, speaking softly. "I didn't mean to do it." He said Madison texted that her dad was asleep and told him to come through her bedroom window. Marcus Hale came along, waiting in the backyard with the baseball bat Tyler brought just to scare him. Tyler claimed that when he entered the house, he saw Stephen asleep on the sofa, the TV still on. He stepped closer, heard Madison whisper, "Now." He raised the bat, and then everything blurred. Tyler said he only remembered a loud thud, then absolute silence. When he opened his eyes, Stephen was motionless, blood pooling on the floor. "I panicked, really panicked. She just stood there watching," Tyler said, his voice shaking, then told me to help drag him to the car. His account matched the forensic findings, the blood trail dragged from the living room to the back door, Tyler said. Marcus helped open the trunk, while Madison gathered blankets and newspapers. "She said we needed to clean the scene," he said. When asked why he didn't flee alone, Tyler replied, "She said we'd go to California. She said everything would be fine if we were together." When investigators asked if anyone was coerced, Tyler paused, then said, "No one forced me, but I think she knew how to make people do what she wanted." In the third interrogation room, Marcus Hale was entirely different. He talked incessantly, rambling, sometimes laughing, sometimes muttering to himself. When asked about the night of October 2nd, Marcus said he was only standing guard outside because that was his duty to protect. He claimed Madison was in danger and that the father was the bad guy. When Doyle asked who told him that, Marcus replied, "Madison said it. She's the one I protect. I just helped them clean up." After a few questions, Marcus admitted to helping Tyler move the body to the car and burning some items on the girl's orders. When asked what orders, he emphasized, she said it was the only way to protect her from him. The investigators noted, his statement was disjointed, but the details matched the timeline and sequence of events. By the end of the interrogation, the forensic team sent a preliminary report. Blood on Madison and Tyler's clothing matched Stephen Mercer's DNA. Blood on the baseball bat and blanket matched the samples in the car trunk. Marcus's phone contained a photo of the Ford before it was abandoned at Norris Lake. When Doyle returned to Madison's room, he read Tyler's statement to her without comment, just reading. Madison sat still, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the table. When he reached the part where Tyler said she ordered now, she gave a slight smirk and said softly, "He can say whatever he wants." Doyle asked, "Is anything in there wrong?" Madison replied, "I didn't order anyone." When Doyle asked one last time, "Was anyone else in the house besides you and your father that night?" Madison went silent, her gaze icy. By evening, all three were transferred to separate juvenile and adult detention facilities. Interrogation records, forensic evidence, and digital data were compiled and sent to the prosecutor's office. The summary report stated, Madison Mercer, 15, denied involvement, gave false timeline and location, displayed calm, no fear. Tyler Reed, 19, admitted to participating in the murder, confirmed it was deliberate at Madison's request. Marcus Hale, 22, confirmed assisting with moving the body, showed signs of mental instability, statement matched event sequence. At day's end, Doyle wrote in his investigation log, 3 statements, 3 personalities, 1 truth, a murder planned by a girl who believed her 15 years were an impenetrable shield. The Mercer case was officially forwarded to the Knox County Prosecutor's Office to prepare charges of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Outside, Knoxville sank into a damp, cold night, and for the first time since that fateful morning, no one on Cedar Ridge left their lights on overnight. On October 5, 2008, 2 days after the 3 suspects were arrested, the Mercer case file was delivered to the Knox County Prosecutor's Office. On Chief Prosecutor Karen Dwyer's desk was a thick stack of files, forensic reports, interrogation transcripts, phone data, and crime scene photos. Beside them was the baseball bat, sealed in an evidence bag, stained with dark dried blood. Dwyer skimmed the summary from Lieutenant Doyle. 3 suspects, 3 statements aligning on the sequence of events. Planned act, not impulsive. Primary suspect, Madison Mercer, 15. The first meeting among prosecutors took place that morning. Dwyer and the legal team analyzed every detail, from physical evidence to digital data. Copies of the text between Madison and Tyler were presented. "He's asleep now. Make it quiet." A short, cold, emotionless command, enough to confirm Madison's active intent. The timeline was clearly reconstructed on the evening of October 1. Madison texted Tyler, around 3 a.m. The attack occurred by 4 a.m. The 3 suspects left the house in Stephen's car by 6 a.m. The body was left at Norris Lake by 9 a.m. Madison appeared on Walmart cameras, buying hair dye to cover their tracks. Everything aligned perfectly with GPS data and Tyler Reed's statement. Investigators also presented forensic results. Stephen Mercer's blood was found on Madison and Tyler's clothing, while Marcus had blood on his wrist, proving he assisted in moving the body. No signs of coercion or defense. The forensic report described the victim's injuries as multiple head traumas, at least 6 blows, 3, causing immediate skull fractures. Dwyer closed the file and said succinctly, "This wasn't impulsive. This was a plan." The central issue for the prosecution was motive. Statements, texts, and prior behavior all pointed to one reason. Madison wanted to escape her father's control. Neighbors, Madison's friends, and teachers at West Haven High School reported she often complained that her father wouldn't let her be free. In a text to Tyler 2 weeks before the crime, Madison wrote, "If he's gone, things will be better. They can't jail a kid." This became direct evidence of her motive, a warped belief that her youth would shield her from punishment. Prosecutor Dwyer concluded in her report, the primary motive was not hatred or self-defense. This was a deliberate act to remove a personal obstacle driven by a misconception of the law and a sense of invulnerability. In the draft indictment, Dwyer defined each person's role. Madison Mercer was the mastermind initiating, planning, and directing the act. Tyler Reed was the executor, directly attacking the victim. Marcus Hale was an accomplice, assisting in moving the body and covering tracks. All three were proposed for prosecution on two main charges: first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Madison Mercer, despite being 15, would be requested for prosecution as an adult due to the deliberate intent, planning, and brutality of her actions. Dwyer referenced Tennessee's juvenile transfer hearing statute, allowing courts to transfer juvenile cases to criminal court if the defendant's cognitive capacity and preparation for the act equate to an adult. The preliminary indictment was supported by a detailed timeline from the investigation team. September 25th, Madison texted Tyler, discussing a plan to leave Knoxville. September 30th, Tyler bought a baseball bat at a sporting goods store, confirmed by credit card receipt. Evening of October 1st, Madison told a classmate this weekend everything will change. Early morning October 2nd, Madison sent "He's asleep now." Tyler and Marcus appeared on cameras near the Mercer house. The attack occurred. Around 4:30 a.m., the three suspects left the scene in Stevens Ford. 6:10 a.m. Highway cameras captured the car heading toward Norris Lake. 6:45 a.m. Madison's phone GPS signal stopped, reactivated near Walmart an hour later. 9 a.m. Madison appeared on Walmart surveillance, buying hair dye and snacks. The entire timeline was printed and pinned to a board in the prosecution's meeting room. Madison was present at every critical point. Tyler and Marcus were involved at key moments, but their roles were execution. Dwyer concluded, "Without Madison, this case doesn't exist." The next legal issue was the prosecution strategy. The team identified three key points to prove in court. 1. The act was intentional and pre-planned, evidenced by texts, weapon preparation, and body disposal. 2. No defensive or immediate conflict motive. 3. Awareness of legal consequences but proceeding anyway, shown by discussions about not being punished heavily. The legal tech team was tasked with creating a 3D crime scene reconstruction and action sequence for the jury. Meanwhile, a psychology expert team was requested to assess Madison's cognitive capacity to counter defense claims for juvenile court. By October 10th, the completed indictment was signed. Madison Mercer was formally charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Tyler Reed was charged with first-degree murder, Marcus Hale with aiding and abetting murder and concealing evidence. The prosecutor's office announced in a brief press conference, "This act cannot be seen as a youthful mistake. It was a calculated crime, executed with chilling clarity." As the meeting ended, Dwyer gathered her documents, looked at the victim's photo on her desk, a man smiling with his three daughters, and quietly told her assistant, "This isn't just a murder case. It's a test of justice's boundaries." The Mercer file was stamped ready for preliminary hearing and sent to Knox County Court. Outside the hallway, reporters and journalists waited, ready to make Madison Mercer the headline of every paper the next day. Knoxville, once again, was rocked by a story no one believed could happen in their own home. On the morning of March 12, 2009, nearly 6 months after the fateful night on Cedar Ridge Court, the case of State of Tennessee versus Madison Mercer and co-defendants officially went to trial at Knox County Court. From early morning, dozens of reporters gathered outside, with cameras, tripods, and news vans filling the plaza. Local papers ran bold headlines: "Madison Mercer case, 15-year-old girl faces charges for killing father." This was no longer an ordinary case. It had become a symbol of a haunting question in public discourse. Can justice punish a killer who is only 15? At 8:30 a.m., Madison Mercer was escorted into court in a gray suit, hair neatly tied, face lightly made up. She didn't look around, didn't bow her head, didn't shy from the cameras. As she entered the courtroom, everyone watched in silence. No one saw fear or remorse on her face. Her gaze swept over the prosecutor, the jury, then lingered on an empty seat in the audience, where her father, the man she killed, once belonged. Across the room, Chief Prosecutor Karen Dwyer stood, delivering her opening statement. Her voice was calm but sharp. "This is a case about betrayal, about evil, disguised in the face of a child. Madison Mercer didn't just take the life of the father who raised her. She planned every step, directed others to act, and tried to erase all traces. The evidence will show she acted with calculation, fully aware of the legal consequences, and believed her age would shield her from punishment. The room fell silent. Defense attorney Richard Haynes countered immediately, stressing that Madison was a minor, incapable of fully understanding the consequences. My client is a 15-year-old girl, isolated, manipulated by older individuals. We cannot view her through the lens of a cold-blooded adult. Haynes requested the case be moved to juvenile court, arguing that a criminal trial would be a second cruelty. Judge Arthur Hayes, with over 20 years handling serious murder cases, listened silently. He opened the file, reviewed Madison's psychological report, then asked, "Does the prosecution have a response?" Dwyer replied concisely, "There's clear evidence the defendant acted with full awareness. She planned, chose the moment, prepared the weapon, and coordinated the act. This wasn't impulsive." After nearly an hour of debate, the judge ruled, "The court grants the prosecution's request. Defendant Madison Mercer will be tried as an adult." Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Some in the audience wept. Madison sat still, eyes down, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. That afternoon, jury selection began. Over 50 Knoxville citizens were summoned. 12 were chosen after 2 days of vetting. 6 men, 6 women, mostly teachers, engineers, and civilians. Some admitted reading about the case but pledged objectivity. Dwyer, addressing the jury, emphasized, "We're not asking you to judge a child, we're asking you to look at the truth. The defendant's actions are no longer those of a child." The first trial day ended with opening statements from both sides. The prosecution painted a concise picture: a devoted father, a cunning but cold daughter, and 2 accomplices drawn into a crime they didn't fully grasp. Dwyer closed her statement with a line that silenced the room. "She didn't kill her father in anger, she killed him to prove she could." Defense attorney Haynes spoke in a low tone, aiming for empathy. "Dear jury, Madison Mercer is a wounded child. She grew up alone, without a mother, under pressure from a strict father. Meeting Tyler Reed gave her a refuge, but that relationship pulled her into a spiral she couldn't control." He paused, looking at Madison. "She made a mistake. But a child's mistake cannot be punished like a monster's." As the trial adjourned for the day, the media swarmed the hallway. Images of Madison leaving the courtroom under police escort flooded evening news. National networks began covering the story, dubbing it the Mercer paradox, a contradiction of innocence and cruelty. The next day, the courtroom's atmosphere grew heavier. Madison sat beside her lawyer, hands clasped, silent. Tyler Reed and Marcus Hale faced separate hearings, but all eyes were on the girl in the center of the main courtroom. Those who knew Madison, classmates, teachers, neighbors, were present. Many still unable to believe the girl they knew from the school band now faced first-degree murder charges. Before the court recessed to prepare for evidence presentation, Judge Hayes addressed the jury. "You've heard 2 stories, one of cold calculation, one of youth and mistakes. Starting tomorrow, you'll decide what's true." He tapped his gavel, closing the first day of trial. Outside, as dusk fell over Knoxville, dozens of cameras remained trained on the courthouse. Evening news tickers read, "Madison Mercer, composed on first trial day. Court confirms adult trial." For the prosecution, this was the first step in proving a grim truth. For Madison, it was merely the stage where she began playing her role, a killer who believed she remained untouchable, even in a courtroom of justice. On the morning of March 13, 2009, the trial of State of Tennessee versus Madison Mercer entered its second day, the most critical of the trial phase. The Knox County courtroom was packed. Reporters crowded the hallway. National news channels had cameras set up outside. The air in the room was heavy as lead. When Judge Hayes announced the start of the prosecution's evidence presentation, the audience fell silent. Chief Prosecutor Karen Dwyer stood, holding a thick file, and approached the podium. She began calmly, without theatrics, but clearly, Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you'll see today isn't speculation or emotion. This is physical truth, undeniable truth, recorded in blood, digital data, and the words of those who committed this crime. Dwyer signaled. A court officer brought up the first evidence bag, an aluminum baseball bat, sealed in clear plastic, with reddish-brown streaks along its length. "This is the murder weapon found at the scene, under the living room table," she said, her voice cold. DNA samples from the bat's surface match the victim, Stephen Mercer. Additionally, there are Tyler Reed's fingerprints and a small bloodied handprint, matching Madison Mercer exactly. The courtroom stirred. Madison sat motionless, expressionless. Next was the gray jacket Madison wore when arrested. A faint stain on the sleeve, invisible to the naked eye, glowed under UV light. A forensic report displayed on a large screen confirmed the blood matched Stephen Mercer's. Dwyer said nothing more, only looking at the jury, whose shocked eyes turned to the 15-year-old girl, sitting calmly, hands clasped on the table. She moved to electronic evidence. Text messages between Madison and Tyler appeared on the screen. "He's asleep now. Make it quiet. Take him out." Dwyer let the screen linger for a few seconds, then said, "These words cannot be misunderstood. These aren't cries for help. These are orders." The jury took notes. Some exchanged glances. Defense attorney Haynes objected, arguing the prosecution was subjectively interpreting, but the judge overruled. "The texts are verified. The jury will assess their meaning." The prosecution continued with Walmart surveillance footage. The screen showed Madison and Tyler entering the store at 9:02 a.m. on October 2nd, just 3 hours after the victim's death. She wore the gray jacket, walked slowly, holding a roll of cash. They picked out black hair dye, snacks, and 2 bottles of water. At the checkout, Madison smiled at the cashier. Dwyer froze the video on that smile and said, "This is the face of a girl 3 hours after her father was brutally killed. Calm, unafraid, unremorseful." In the room, some covered their mouths or bowed their heads. After physical evidence, the prosecution presented transcribed and recorded confessions from Tyler Reed and Marcus Hale. A segment played over the speakers, Tyler's voice trembling. "She told me to wait until he was asleep. When I did it, she just watched. She said, 'Finish it.' Then we dragged him to the car. She helped open the door and wrapped him in a blanket." Next was Marcus Hale's voice, erratic but clear. "I just helped them. The girl said it was to protect her from him. She gave orders. I followed." Dwyer stated. Both statements given independently align perfectly in sequence and action. Madison Mercer was present, directing and assisting throughout. Forensic expert Dr. Evan Cordell was called to testify. He detailed the autopsy: 6 severe head injuries, 3 sufficient to cause instant death, blood splatter on the wall consistent with the victim being struck while seated. Based on the force, height, and angle of impact, Cordell said, the weapon was a 32-inch aluminum bat, exactly matching the evidence recovered. He confirmed no signs of resistance, indicating the victim was attacked while asleep. When Dwyer asked, "Could this be called a premeditated act?" Cordell replied, "Yes. The perpetrator knew precisely where to strike for fatal injury." Finally, Lieutenant Mark Doyle, lead investigator, took the witness stand. In uniform, his voice was calm but firm. He recounted Madison's arrest. She didn't ask what happened or about her father. She only said, "I have the right to remain silent, don't I?" Doyle paused, looking directly at Madison. "I've investigated dozens of murders in 15 years. I've never seen eyes as empty as that girl's." The defense objected, calling the statement subjective. The judge nodded but allowed it. The jury notes the witness's impression but will rely on concrete evidence. As Doyle stepped down from the witness stand, Karen Dwyer rose to conclude her presentation. She walked slowly toward the jury, speaking each word clearly. "What you've seen today, the baseball bat, the blood-stained jacket, the text messages, the Walmart video, the confessions of 2 accomplices, all tell the same story. This wasn't a burst of anger, not the reaction of a cornered child. This was a deliberate plan, calculated step by step, executed coldly, and completed with chilling clarity. She paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on Madison. She didn't act in a haze, she acted because she believed her age would shield her from the truth. But justice isn't measured by birth year, justice is measured by actions. The courtroom felt almost frozen. The jury bowed their heads, taking notes. In the back, a few residents quietly wiped tears. Madison sat still, arms crossed, her face devoid of emotion. When Judge Hayes announced the end of the day's proceedings, Dwyer gathered her files and stepped away from the podium, while Madison was led out through a side exit. Television cameras captured the moment, her cold face, straight posture, head unbowed. That evening's WBIR News opened with Mercer Trial Day 2. Prosecution presents undeniable evidence, describes case as a coldly calculated act by a teen. In Knoxville, people began to see Madison not as a misguided child, but as a symbol of cruelty cloaked in a 15-year-old's face. On the third day of the trial, March 14, 2009, the Knox County courtroom remained packed. The heavy atmosphere from the prosecution's evidence lingered. That morning, the defense began their case, their only chance to shift how the jury viewed Madison Mercer. Defense attorney Richard Haynes stepped to the podium. He spoke in a low, deliberate tone, starkly different from Dwyer's sharp delivery. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "no matter what you've heard, please remember Madison Mercer is not a monster. She is a 15-year-old girl, a lost child, manipulated, and trapped in a relationship she couldn't control." He paused, letting the silence settle in the hushed room. "I'm not here to deny that a tragedy occurred," he continued, "but I'm here to prove my client didn't act with malice, but in a state of coercion, manipulation, and incomplete understanding of her actions' legal consequences." Haynes presented his central argument. Madison was heavily influenced by Tyler Reed, 4 years her senior, with a history of violence and psychological manipulation. He cited text message records showing instances where Madison was pressured to follow Tyler's demands, threatened with abandonment if she didn't do what was needed to be free. He argued that Madison, lacking a mother's guidance, developed an extreme emotional dependency on Tyler. She didn't understand that the freedom Tyler spoke of was a crime, he said. She only knew that if she didn't act, she'd lose the one person she believed loved her. The defense called clinical psychologist Dr. Sarah Lowell, who had evaluated Madison during detention. She testified, "Madison exhibits classic signs of attachment disorder, a condition that makes individuals prone to emotional dependency, especially when feeling isolated." Lowell added that Madison's emotional development index was lower than her biological age, leading to an inability to accurately assess the full consequences of her actions. When cross-examined by the prosecution, "Do you believe Madison didn't know killing her father was wrong?" Lowell replied, "No, I'm not saying she didn't know it was wrong. I'm saying she wasn't mature enough to grasp the full implications, not just for herself, but for everyone involved." Haynes leveraged the expert's testimony to support his motion to transfer the case to juvenile court, arguing that trying Madison as an adult would contradict the justice system's rehabilitative goals. "The purpose of the law," he said, "is not just to punish, but to rebuild lives. And with Madison Mercer, that chance still exists." He emphasized her clean record, lack of prior violent behavior, and strong academic history. "If you focus on her actions after the crime without considering the psychological context before it," he said, "you'll misjudge the nature of this case. She didn't kill out of malice, she killed because she believed it was the only way to be loved." When Haynes concluded, Judge Hayes allowed Prosecutor Dwyer to respond. She stepped to the podium, her voice firm and unapologetically cold. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "emotions can be described, psychology can be explained, but actions cannot be erased." She pointed to the large screen, replaying the Walmart video, Madison smiling at the cashier 3 hours after the crime. "Is this the behavior of a manipulated child?" Dwyer asked. "A coerced girl, or the actions of someone who knew exactly what they'd done and was trying to cover it up?" She highlighted other evidence, the black hair dye and receipt found in Madison's bag. No one under manipulation goes to buy dye to change their appearance right after a crime, she said. That's a deliberate decision to conceal evidence. The prosecution also noted Madison's actions in turning off her phone, deleting texts, and telling Tyler don't say anything to anyone. These, Dwyer argued, aren't the reactions of someone coerced, they're the calculated steps of someone aware of the consequences and accepting them. She closed her rebuttal with a statement that silenced the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, Madison Mercer may be wounded. She may need help. But wounds don't justify taking a life. She wasn't controlled by Tyler Reed. She controlled him with her calculated innocence. Judge Hayes noted both sides' arguments without comment. He ordered a recess before witness testimonies. As people stood, Madison remained seated, hands on the table, staring into the distance. It was unclear what she heard in the debate, and she showed no emotion when her father or Tyler were mentioned. That afternoon, Knoxville media reported, defense argues Madison Mercer was psychologically manipulated, prosecution counters with cold evidence of post-crime composure. Public opinion split. Some saw her as a victim of circumstance and deceit. Others believed it was a defense tactic to save a deliberate killer. As dusk fell outside the court, Judge Hayes gathered his papers, closing the third day. He looked at the thick file labeled Madison Mercer and said softly to his clerk, "If this is a child, the world needs to redefine childhood." On the fourth day, March 15, 2009, the Knox County courtroom glowed under harsh white lights. The audience seats remained full, familiar faces appearing each morning. Reporters, Knoxville residents, and parents seeking to understand why a child could commit such a crime. Today, the court dedicated the entire session to witness testimonies, those who had seen Madison Mercer's life, personality, and psychological transformation. The first witness was Laura Hayes, Stephen Mercer's mother and Madison's grandmother. She stood as the clerk called her name. Her voice hoarse, slightly trembling but resolute. "Stephen was a good father," she said. "I saw how he raised his daughters after his wife left. He was always patient, never hit or harshly scolded them." When the prosecutor asked, "Did Stephen ever show violent, abusive, or threatening behavior toward his daughters?" she shook her head firmly. "Never. He could be strict, but he never did anything to make me fear for the kids." She paused, tears falling onto the wooden stand. "I don't understand, why was he killed by his own child?" The question echoed through the room unanswered. The next witness was Chloe Bennett, Madison's classmate at West Knoxville High School. Chloe said Madison was a top student, always leading the class, but very different. She rarely smiled genuinely. When she spoke, her eyes seemed to look through people. Once, she told me she could make anyone believe anything if she wanted. The courtroom stirred. When pressed for specifics, Chloe continued. One time she lied about her dad scolding her, then later said it was just a test of people's reactions. I think she liked watching how others reacted more than feeling anything herself. The defense objected, arguing the testimony was subjective, but the judge allowed it. This is a character witness. The jury will assess credibility. The third witness was James McAllister, Madison's history teacher. Tall, in a brown jacket, he spoke in a deep voice. "Madison was an outstanding student," he began. "She grasped lessons faster than most classmates, but one thing always concerned me. She lacked emotional responses." He recounted a class discussion on war crimes. While other kids were shocked or sad, Madison said, "It was the inevitability of human evolution." She said it calmly, without emotion. When I pressed her, she smiled and said, "You don't need to emotionalize everything, teacher." McAllister lowered his head, sighing. "When I heard about the case, I wasn't surprised. I was just heartbroken." Next, neighbor Eleanor Woods, 63, took the stand. She lived 2 houses from the Mercers. "That night, I was watching TV when I heard a strange noise, like something heavy falling. Then silence," she said. "I thought someone dropped something. Then around 4 a.m., I heard a car door shut and a brief engine sound. When I looked out, I saw car headlights flash and disappear. She added that the neighborhood was usually quiet, with cars rarely passing at that hour. Police confirmed her account matched the time Stephen's car left the house. Finally, the prosecution called a key expert witness, Dr. Alan Brewer, a criminal psychologist from the University of Tennessee. He had analyzed Madison's interrogation records and behavioral data throughout the investigation. Before the court, he presented his findings in a clear, almost emotionless voice. Madison Mercer exhibits a behavioral pattern typical of individuals with a dominant-seeking personality, a drive to assert power through controlling others, especially those close or vulnerable. Brewer displayed slides of excerpts from Madison's interrogation. She showed no emotional reaction when informed of her father's death, he said. She only asked, "I have the right to remain silent, don't I?" That's not fear or remorse, it's confidence in her control. When the prosecutor asked, "Would you call this arrogance?" Brewer nodded. Yes, with voice and body language analysis, Madison displayed clear signs of superiority, especially when responding to interrogators. She saw herself as controlling the situation. Defense attorney Haynes objected, requesting the psychological assessment be struck as speculative. The judge allowed it to continue, noting the witness is providing professional observations, not legal conclusions. Brewer went on, his tone unchanged. What's chilling isn't just the coldness of her actions, but the complete lack of guilt afterward. Madison didn't just plan to kill her father, she felt no remorse for it. To her, it was just something to be done to achieve her goal. The jury fell silent. In that moment, the overhead lights reflected off Madison's face, cold, composed, without a trace of emotion. As Brewer stepped down, Judge Hayes surveyed the courtroom and said softly, "Court is recessed. Tomorrow, we'll hear closing arguments from the prosecution and defense." As people rose, reporters began drafting headlines for the evening news. Witness Madison Mercer intelligent, cold, and emotionless. A Knoxville News-Sentinel reporter wrote, "The courtroom felt like hearing about a storm, not for its force, but for the silence before it struck." Outside, Tennessee's night was eerily quiet. But in the courtroom, the image of a 15-year-old girl sitting motionless under white lights haunted everyone present, a warning that evil sometimes doesn't roar. It smiles in silence. On the fifth day of the trial, March 16, 2009, Knox County Court, the morning air was thick, silent, and suffocatingly heavy. The press called it the day of truth, the day Madison Mercer would face the prosecutor directly. Every seat was filled, camera lenses trained on the defendant's table, ready to capture every expression, every breath of the 15-year-old who had chilled Knoxville. Madison was brought in, hands uncuffed, hair loose to her shoulders, white shirt crisp. When the clerk called her name, she nodded without speaking. Her face was unnervingly calm. Prosecutor Karen Dwyer stepped to the podium, holding a thick file containing all electronic evidence, statements, interrogation transcripts, and forensic reports. Judge Arthur Hayes reminded Madison she could refuse to answer. She replied curtly, "I have nothing to hide. I'll tell the truth." Her voice didn't waver or break. Dwyer began, her tone sharp as a blade. "Madison, on the morning of October 2, 2008, around 3 a.m., Stephen Mercer, your father, was attacked and killed. Do you remember the text you sent Tyler Reed at 2:43 a.m.? The one that said, 'He's asleep now.'" "Yes," Madison replied. "I sent that, but I didn't tell him to do anything." "What about the text, 'Make it quiet 5 minutes later'?" "I just wanted him to be quiet, not wake my dad. I didn't think he'd actually do it." The courtroom held its breath. Dwyer held up a printed text. 17 minutes later, your father was dead from 6 head injuries. You still claim you didn't know what would happen. I knew he was angry, but I didn't think he'd really do it. The prosecutor gave a cold smile. And Tyler Reed's statement? She told me to wait until he was asleep and act. How do you explain that? Madison pursed her lips. Tyler's lying to save himself. He's always been like that. Dwyer pressed further, and helping move the body, driving to Norris Lake, buying hair dye, spending the victim's money, that was all out of panic. I didn't know what to do, Madison said. I just followed them. Dwyer nodded, coolly displaying the Walmart video. Madison and Tyler at the checkout, her smiling at the cashier. You call this panic? A girl who just lost her father looks as calm as if she's on a weekend stroll. Madison looked up, her lips curling slightly. I don't cry in front of strangers. That doesn't mean I wasn't hurting. Murmurs spread. Dwyer continued slowly. You didn't cry when arrested, didn't cry when charged. Does that mean you felt no guilt? Madison replied, her gaze icy. Feeling guilty changes nothing. He's already dead. Someone in the room sobbed. The judge tapped his gavel. But the silence that followed was more chilling than the cry. Madison, did you know your father once took leave just to attend your concert? Dwyer said, her voice lowering. He wrote, Madison is the best thing in my life. He always wanted things his way. Madison replied evenly. I just wanted to be free. That statement cut through the air like a final blow. Dwyer turned to the jury. Freedom? That's what she calls killing her father. Defense attorney Richard Haynes jumped up, objecting that the prosecution was making subjective inferences. The judge called for order, but didn't intervene. Madison, Dwyer asked one last time. Do you regret it? I wish things had been different, but wishing isn't regret. Some jurors looked down. The court reporter paused her pen. Dwyer looked at her, voice soft. Thank you. I think we've seen the true nature of this case. Haynes immediately requested a recess for a hostile atmosphere, but the judge denied it. Request denied. The trial continues. That afternoon, the prosecution questioned details about moving the body. Madison admitted to opening the car door and grabbing a blanket to wrap it, but denied touching the body. Dwyer displayed a photo of her fingerprint on the trunk lid. Can you explain this? No. I don't need to explain anymore. The judge tapped his gavel. The defendant will maintain order. Madison looked at him, giving a faint smile. Yes, Your Honor. That smile, fleeting but chilling. Not a smile of fear or remorse, but of someone who believed she still held control. That night, Knoxville TV replayed the entire confrontation. Headlines ran, Madison Mercer's smile sends chills through Knoxville. A psychologist commented, it's the expression of someone with a need for dominance. She understands the power of a gaze and revels in it. The next day, a juror whispered to the clerk, it's not her words that make me think she's guilty. It's how she looked at us, like she's above us all. Judge Hayes noted in his records, the defendant's demeanor shows clear arrogance and lack of remorse. This may be considered in sentencing. As the trial closed, Madison was led out through a side exit. She turned, glancing back at the courtroom, her eyes cold, lips slightly curled. TV cameras caught the moment, a photo that spread across the next morning's papers with the caption, Madison Mercer's gaze, the look of someone who destroyed a world and still believes she can escape. Outside the courthouse, the crowd was silent. An elderly woman told a reporter, I'm not scared of her because of the crime. I'm scared because she's not scared of anything. In the now empty courtroom, Judge Hayes closed the file and said softly to his clerk, tomorrow, the verdict will be delivered. But justice, no matter how stern, can't restore the souls of two people, one who's dead and one who's buried herself in darkness. On the sixth day of the trial, March 17, 2009, Knoxville, Tennessee. The atmosphere in the Knox County courtroom was taut as a bowstring. After the haunting confrontation the previous day, the public dubbed today judgment by words, when both sides would deliver their final closing arguments before the case was handed to the jury. No one in the courtroom spoke loudly. Only the rustle of papers and the quiet ticking of the clock filled the air. Chief Prosecutor Karen Dwyer stood first. She held her notes, but barely glanced at them. Her voice was slow, low, and carried a weight that commanded the room's attention. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the past week, you've heard testimonies, seen photos, read text messages, and examined evidence. You know what happened on the night of October 2nd, 2008. But today, I want to talk about what lies between the lines, about choice. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the jurors. Madison Mercer was not a victim of impulse. She chose to plan. She chose the moment. She chose the tool. And when it was done, she chose to smile, wash her hands, and walk out of that house as if nothing had happened. The screen behind her lit up, displaying the timeline, 2:43 a.m. He's asleep now. 2:59 a.m. Make it quiet. 3:16 a.m. Victim deceased. 9:02 a.m. Madison at Walmart. Dwyer pointed to the final entry. This is the last piece of evidence you need. A frightened child doesn't go buy hair dye. A manipulated victim doesn't smile on security footage. She wasn't panicking. She was in control. The prosecutor continued, her voice cold as steel. We're not here to judge Madison's childhood. We're here to judge her actions. And her actions show clarity, calculation, and above all, callousness. Throughout the interrogations, Madison never asked, "Where's my father?" Never said, "I'm sorry," she said. "I have the right to remain silent." That's not fear. That's the confidence of someone who believed they'd won. She stepped closer to the jury box, her voice lowering. Stephen Mercer didn't die in a fit of rage. He died because his daughter believed the law couldn't touch her. And if you don't speak up today, the message will be clear, that age can protect a killer, that a cold smile can defeat justice. Dwyer paused for a moment, then delivered her final words, each one deliberate. Stephen Mercer got no second chance, and Madison doesn't deserve one. On behalf of justice and the departed, we ask you to find her guilty of first-degree murder. She nodded slightly and returned to her seat. In the deathly quiet room, a few in the audience silently wiped tears. Madison sat motionless, hands on the table, her face expressionless. Then it was defense attorney Richard Haynes' turn. He rose slowly, removed his glasses, and looked around the room with a somber gaze. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "I'm not here to say Madison Mercer is innocent. She's not innocent. But I'm here to say Madison Mercer is not a monster." He took a few steps toward the prosecution table, then turned back. "The prosecution showed you images, played confessions, and yes, they're horrific. But there's one thing they can't show you. The mind of a 15-year-old girl, alone, trapped in a relationship she believed was love. Tyler Reed was the adult. He held the bat. He struck the blows. And Madison, she was just a child who trusted the wrong person." He paused, his voice trembling but steady. "I don't deny Madison knew the plan. But knowing isn't understanding. You may see coldness in her, but that's a defense mechanism, the way a child copes with something horrific she can't comprehend. She didn't smile out of arrogance. She smiled because she didn't know another way to survive." Haynes turned to look at Madison, then spoke softly. "She's lost her father. She's lost her youth. And whatever the outcome today, she's lost her life." He lifted his head, facing the jury. "The law exists not just to punish, but to redeem. Madison is only 15. Give her the chance to find the right path, so one day, she might truly understand what you're deciding today." The defense attorney took a deep breath, then said his final words, "Please don't see her as a murderer. See her as a child who's lost her way." The room was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Judge Hayes glanced at the clock and tapped his gavel lightly. "Both sides have concluded their arguments. The case will now be handed to the jury for deliberation." The jury was led to a private room. The courtroom's light dimmed, and people exhaled as if emerging from a storm. Outside, the media ran headlines. Prosecution, she chose to kill her father. Defense, see her as a child. In a corner of the room, Madison sat still, staring into the distance. She didn't cry or speak. As police escorted her out, a reporter captured the moment, describing it, not fear, not remorse. Just the empty gaze of someone who knows they can't go back, but hasn't admitted it. Inside the deliberation room, the 12 jurors sat quietly around a round table, stacks of documents and haunting photos before them. One spoke first. "I can't forget her eyes when she said, 'He's already dead.'" Outside, Knoxville's night began to fall. Silent, heavy, as if awaiting the verdict of a crime no words could wash clean. On the 7th day of the trial, March 18, 2009, Knoxville, Tennessee. After nearly 14 hours of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom in absolute silence. All of Knoxville seemed to hold its breath. The courthouse hallway was packed with reporters, flashbulbs piercing through wooden door frames. As the courtroom doors opened, the 12 jurors entered, their faces heavy with gravity. Madison Mercer sat between two police officers, still maintaining the cold composure of previous days. Judge Arthur Hayes asked the jury foreperson, "Have you reached a verdict?" The middle-aged woman stood, her voice slightly trembling but firm. "Your Honor, we have reached a unanimous verdict." The air in the room grew thick. Everyone held their breath. On the charge of first-degree murder, the defendant Madison Mercer, we find guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find guilty. The only sound was the clerk's pen tapping metal. Madison didn't flinch, didn't bow her head, just stared straight ahead, as if the verdict was a mere formality unrelated to her. In the audience, the victim's mother sobbed, needing support. Judge Hayes tapped his gavel, calling for order, then leaned forward to read the sentence. Each word heavy as iron striking wood. Defendant Madison Mercer, your actions were the result of calculation, intent, and coldness. You not only took your father's life, but shattered society's fundamental trust that between parent and child lies an inviolable boundary. This court sentences you to 25 years in the Tennessee Women's Correctional Facility, with no parole for the first 20 years. He paused briefly, then continued. Defendant Tyler Reed, as the direct perpetrator of the murder, this court sentences you to life imprisonment, without parole. Defendant Marcus Hale, due to a documented history of mental illness and confirmed inability to fully comprehend his actions, this court sentences you to mandatory treatment at the state psychiatric hospital until deemed no longer a danger to society. With each sentence read, the room grew heavier. When Madison's turn came, the judge looked directly at her, his voice slowing. "Madison Mercer, I've sat in this chair for over 20 years, but I've never seen eyes like yours. You show no fear, no remorse, no anger. You are empty. I don't know what made a child this way, but I hope, after 25 years, if there's any humanity left, you'll find it." The room seemed to freeze. Madison stood slowly as an officer signaled. She nodded, her voice chillingly calm. "Thank you, Your Honor." No one breathed. As she turned to leave, reporters' cameras flashed. In that flood of light, Madison gave a faint smile, small, almost mocking, hard to discern as reaction or intent. That photo hit the front page of the Knoxville News-Sentinel the next morning, headlined, "You'll die in prison. Judge gives 15-year-old 25-year sentence after conspiring to kill father." The article read, "The young girl shed no tears at her sentencing. Madison Mercer's fleeting smile became an image that chilled Knoxville. A smile of someone who lost her youth but never lost control." Outside the courthouse, dozens of residents awaited the verdict. Hearing Madison received only 25 years, one man shook his head. 25 years isn't enough to fix a soul like that. Meanwhile, the police van rolled away from the courthouse. Madison sat in the back, hands neatly on her lap, eyes fixed out the window. No one knew what she was thinking, perhaps nothing at all. Throughout the investigation, interrogations, trial and sentencing, Madison Mercer never shed a tear. Judge Hayes signed the verdict, affixing a red seal. When asked about his feelings post-trial, he said only, "Some cases don't end with a prison sentence, they end with a warning to us all about what can hide in a child's eyes." After the sentencing, Knoxville fell into a prolonged silence. The Mercer home on Cedar Ridge Court remained sealed for weeks. Grass grew high around the steps, small toys scattered on the back porch, remnants of a once peaceful family, now preserved only in a criminal file. Stephen's two younger daughters, Sierra and Olivia, were sent to live with relatives in Nashville, later adopted by another family. None were allowed contact with Madison, even by letter. In the court file, their legal guardian noted briefly, "The children need to live in an environment free of the case's memory." Laura Hayes, Stephen's mother, declined media interviews after the trial. She left only a final statement to the court: "I lost my son, and I lost my granddaughter. No sentence can make me feel justice." The Madison Mercer case quickly outgrew a family tragedy. In the months that followed, it became a hot topic across Tennessee. Talk shows, articles, and TV reports revolved around one question: can a 15-year-old fully understand the consequences of murder? Lawmakers and legal experts were deeply divided. Some argued trying Madison as an adult was necessary due to the crime's brutality and calculation. Others contended it violated the juvenile justice system's humanitarian principles. In an op-ed titled "Childhood Cannot Define Justice" in the Tennessean, the writer argued society was losing the ability to distinguish between a fall and true evil. Conversely, the Knoxville Daily Post countered with a stark headline: "She stopped being a child when she killed her sleeping father." In criminology, the case was dubbed the juvenile arrogance crime. The term later appeared in psychological criminology studies to describe offenses where young perpetrators show callousness, believing the law cannot touch them. Training courses for Tennessee police and the FBI used the Mercer case as a prime example in modules on assessing pre-crime behavior in juveniles. In a 2013 internal training video, Madison's trial image, her fleeting smile during sentencing, was frozen in a close-up. Psychologist Alan Brewer's voice narrated, "This isn't a smile of joy. It's a symbol of power, the power of someone who believes they've made the world take notice." Knoxville never forgot the case. Each October, as leaves turned gold on suburban streets, residents recalled Stephen Mercer as a tragic symbol, a kind father killed by his daughter in his sleep. Madison's name resurfaced periodically in discussions about juvenile law. At the women's prison in Nashville, she continued serving her sentence. A 2018 report noted, "Inmate Mercer, good behavior, shows no remorse or emotional disturbance." The case file was officially closed in 2010, but its echoes never faded. Law schools in Tennessee, Kentucky, and Georgia included the Madison Mercer case in courses on criminal responsibility and juvenile offenders as a stark example of the thin line between juvenile and adult in U.S. criminal law. In a 2020 interview, asked about the case that haunted Knoxville for over a decade, retired Judge Arthur Hayes said only, "Justice is never complete when all parties are victims. One died in darkness, and one continues to live in it." The Madison Mercer case closed as a complete file, full of evidence, testimonies, and verdicts. But in the minds of those who witnessed it, it remains an unhealed crack, not just for the brutality of the act, but because what terrified people most wasn't the crime. It was that the crime was committed with the face of a child and the smile of someone who believed themselves innocent. The Madison Mercer case wasn't just a family tragedy, it was a mirror reflecting a troubling reality of modern America, where the line between youth and responsibility grows ever blurrier in a society where technology, isolation, and psychological pressures push many teens into emotional disconnection. Madison, a smart, accomplished 15-year-old, once a model student, believed her age was a legal shield. She planned her father's murder, executed it coldly, and smiled in court. Madison's coldness didn't stem from innate cruelty, but from a generation losing the ability to feel the real-world consequences of their actions. In today's America, where children grow up surrounded by social media, films, and psychological isolation, human emotions can detach from reality, and when empathy vanishes, morality easily crumbles. The greatest lesson from this story isn't just for lawmakers or courts, but for parents, teachers, and communities. Strictness can't replace understanding. Love can't be shown only through material means. If Stephen Mercer had noticed the changes in his daughter's eyes, the coldness, the distance, the need to be heard, perhaps the tragedy could have been avoided. In today's America, it's not enough to teach children right from wrong. They must learn to feel the consequences of their actions, to know every choice leaves a real mark. The Madison Mercer case reminds us that justice can punish crime, but only understanding and human connection can prevent it at its roots. If you find Madison Mercer's story a warning about coldness and the consequences of wrong choices, Subscribe to the channel to not miss the next true crime stories told from the most authentic perspective. Thank you for following to the end. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring real stories that make all of America shudder.